Hello. As you can tell, the voice is a little bit better, but I've had an outbreak of spotties. Oh, anyway, I need your help. Been a lot of stuff up recently about deca cycles and this, that, and the other, and this has led on to conversations about prolactin and what causes it, etc., etc., etc. So I don't think anyone quite got it right. I've got my own theory, but I don't think it's 100% right. So I'm looking for information. Now, in medicine, naturally high prolactin very rarely causes gyno. But I've seen a lot of anecdotal from users that have had gyno symptoms, used Kerber, and those symptoms have gone away. Um, so, despite what the medical community is saying, it would appear that elevated prolactin in users can cause gyno. But what I'm not sure about is, does it have to have elevated estrogen to have the effect? Because in medical high prolactinemia, um, I don't think estrogen levels are particularly elevated. It's a misfunction of the pituitary gland causing a greater production of prolactin, whereas in bodybuilders, the rise in prolactin is caused through a different mechanism. Um, Medically, in females, you don't see elevated prolactin without elevated estrogen. So I think there's something going on with gyno symptoms with raised prolactin in conjunction with raised estrogen. So you remove one of them. Either you lower the estrogen or you lower prolactin, and that ceases the problem. So anyway, what I'm looking for, because one theory out there at the moment is that nandrolone's attached to the progesterone receptor, and it is, in the case of deca anyway, that because deca only stimulates the receptor by about a quarter, that the body senses a drop in progesterone, and that stimulates prolactin to elevate. But estrogen has to be elevated too. Now, if that was the case, then Winstrol would cause prolactin. And from the little bit of information I've got back off a few users, there has been users who are using Winstrol with test base, and they have had gyno symptoms. So first one is anyone that's used Winstrol on its own or with a test base that's got gyno symptoms. The second question I'm looking to be answered is, I'm led to believe, and I should say I believe, that because of nandrolone's high binding affinity, it displaces progesterone at the receptor, creating a higher level of progesterone, free floating, not bound position, but free floating. This in turn increases estrogen receptor sensitivity. So even though our estrogen levels might not be overly elevated, the body feels that they are. So the next question is, anyone who runs a test base with either deca or tren, have they noticed that they need to increase estrogen management over the same amount of test without deca or tren? So if I would say you run 500 mg of test, 400 mg of deca, and you need to run Arimidex, Novadex just won't cut it, but when you run 500 mg of test on its own, Novadex is fine, it's enough. So I'm looking to see if there's an increased estrogen activity or you get more estrogen symptoms when you add a nandrolone to a test base than you do when you run that test base at the same dose on its own, because that would support the increased receptor sensitivity. What was the other one? I can't remember the other question. So where I am at the moment is, this is the other thing as well. If nandrolones, we know nandrolones bind with the progesterone receptor. We know that's a medical fact. And we know that deca has a lower signaling strength. So one argument is that it decreases progesterone, but it would decrease progesterone effects, but I think it would actually increase progesterone production. We take Novadex and Clomid in PCT because they block the receptors at the hypothalamus that sense estrogen hormone. Therefore, the body thinks estrogen is low, so therefore it produces more GnRH to the pituitary to produce more FSH and LH, in turn to produce more testosterone, which is then converted to estrogen to increase estrogen. So, I'm curious because my thought is then that if you blocked the receptor with a progesterone that had a low progesterone signal, then the body would then start to aromatize more progesterone, or produce more progesterone. Aromatize is the wrong word, sorry. So it would produce more progesterone because it would feel that progesterone was low. Because nandrolones have a higher binding affinity than progesterone to the receptor, that would cause free-floating progesterone levels to elevate noticeably. Now, I know that it takes a rise of progesterone and estrogen in a female to cause a signaling for an increase in prolactin, and then once the baby's born, progesterone drops and prolactin is free to then cause lactation. So does that action lower the body's sense of progesterone or increase it? I don't know is the answer, where I'm trying to find out. Now, Tren is proposed to have a similar, if not slightly more stronger effect on the progesterone receptor than progesterone. So in that case, the body would sense that progesterone was equal or potentially high. So the next question is, has anyone noticed a difference in prolactin levels between running test and deca and running test and tren? So that's the next one. I initially was of the belief that progesterone elevated, or free-flowing progesterone elevated, that in turn increased estrogen receptor sensitivity. So as far as the body was concerned, estrogen was elevated and progesterone was elevated, and therefore it thought you were pregnant. But males generally can't have both, because high progesterone will force estrogen down and high estrogen will force progesterone down. So this is where I'm not sure, if I'm honest. So what I do know is that in all cases, the trigger or the feed for elevated prolactin is elevated estrogen. So we're either having high estrogen, or we've got a scenario with the increase of receptor sensitivity where the body thinks estrogen's high, and that's why prolactin elevates. It's where progesterone plays into this. Is it a low progesterone reading or a high progesterone reading that adds to the problem? So obviously we know we can get prolactin-based gyno, even though medically it's quite rare. So we know that there's things that's happening with suprapharmacological doses that don't track with what we already know medically. So this is what I'm trying to work through at the moment. So your help on those 3 questions will go a long way to seeing what we're seeing in real life. Because, like as that example I've just given you, the science isn't always right or doesn't always transfer. I'm honestly got some things that I think are right. I'm unsure about other things. It'd be interesting to see what readings would be in a deca only cycle as well. Now, I suspect that prolactin will be low because estrogen will be low. But I also suspect that if we are seeing increased estrogenic activity at a fixed dose of test just by the introduction of deca and trenbolone, then obviously we know that sensitivity is increased. Now, deca's conversion to estrogen is very low and it converts to a very weak form of estrogen, so I'm not really overly concerned about deca's contribution to estrogen levels. The next thing would be how the body reacts when nandrolones are bound to the progesterone receptor. I also know that they bind to the 5-alpha reductase, which in turn lowers DHT. We also know that deca converts to DHN. DHT is a protective element at the nipple against gyno, so there is a reason why deca could potentially create direct gyno issues, and it may be that it's the deca that causes the gyno and not actually the elevated prolactin, but then Kerber wouldn't reduce the symptoms. So you can see where this is a lot of trying to work it out. So I hope that's not too confusing. I'll continue to work through what I can study-wise, but I just want to see if some of the findings bear out in the real world. And we will go from there. So I'd appreciate your support and help in that. And by the way, any ideas anybody's got, any theories they've got, because I don't at the moment think we've got it right. Maybe we have, I don't know. I know estrogen is the key in a lot of senses, but I also know that a lot of people just say control estrogen, you'll be fine, and I don't think that's the case, because I think this increased sensitivity means that even levels of estrogen where you normally wouldn't have an issue, you do get one. So then comes the second problem, that if estrogen is pushing prolactin up even at low doses, then if we restrict estrogen even more, how much is that going to impact potential growth? Because as I've said many times, estrogen is a key element in growth, and you don't want to run it overly low or you just won't grow. So you can see where there's a complication here. So do we just manage prolactin with Kerber? But Kerber is not the safest drug, can cause heart valve leaks and things like that. So it's, as you can see, very, very complex, and one solution just throws up more problems. I think one thing is, if you're not symptomatic, then I wouldn't be overly concerned about doing too much about it, but I would make sure you're aware. And another thing is the need for testing, because we need this information if we're going to learn. We're not going to get it from scientific studies, and they don't always translate, and they're not always relevant. And we can't really look at female hormone responses and then say, well, that's the same with males, because it isn't. These hormones work a lot differently in a female, and it doesn't always translate. So any information you can give me over those 3 questions, or any relevant experience, and please guys, keep it relevant. I've asked this on a few forums and I've got quite a few answers that really have got nothing to do with the questions or the topic. So try and keep it relevant. I'm not bothered about what happened when you were on test deca and tren, unless it's in relation to what I've just asked. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rude, but I need the specific information really. Okay, thank you very much, and I'll speak to you guys soon.